If tomorrow every yoga studio closed, if every mat disappeared, if every Instagram post vanished, would yoga disappear or would it still be here breathing quietly inside you? Because somewhere along the way, we have reduced one of humanity's most profound sciences of consciousness into flexibility drills and filtered aesthetics. We trimmed a vast inner ocean into one visible wave and then convinced ourselves the wave is the ocean. And the strange part is, we did not do this because yoga was weak. We did this because yoga was too powerful for a hurried culture, a culture that wants quick results, cannot hold a tradition built on inner maturity. Let me paint you a scene, not from an ancient forest, but from today. Imagine a woman named Aisha, or maybe she's Shweta, or maybe she's someone we know too well. Her day begins before the sun rises, not because she's peaceful, but because she's anxious. Her phone is the first prayer she offers. Notifications, messages, deadlines, the mind starts running before the body even opens its eyes. By 10 a.m., she's already lived 3 lives in her head: an argument that never happened, a future crisis that may never arrive, and a regret from the past she keeps chewing like old food. She sits in meetings with a face that smiles and a heart that feels tight. She laughs on the outside while her nervous system whispers, "I'm not safe." At night, she lies down exhausted and cannot sleep because the body is tired, the mind is done. Then she remembers yoga should help. So she goes to a class, she stretches, she sweats, her body feels better. But 2 hours later, the mind returns to its original storm. And she silently wonders, is yoga overrated? No, love, yoga was never even practiced. What she practiced was one doorway and forgot the temple. This is where we must begin. Yoga is not stretching. Yoga is not calorie burning. Yoga is not a lifestyle accessory. Yoga is not even exercise. Yoga is a method for dissolving fragmentation. And the tragedy is, we are living in the age that needs it most. Modern life is not just busy, it is splintering. It splits your attention into pieces until you no longer remember what it feels like to be whole. So let us return to yoga's source, not as practitioners, not as instructors, but as seekers. Pause with me for a moment. Take a breath. Without adjusting it, just notice. There is already something happening inside you. And that is where yoga begins. The Sanskrit word yoga comes from the root yuj. Yuj means to yoke, to join, to unite. And what is being united? This is where most people stop thinking. They hear union and assume it is poetic. But yoga is not poetry. Yoga is architecture. Yoga is alignment. Union between what? Union between what and what? Body and mind, breath and movement, self and universe. Yes, but let's go deeper. In classical Indian thought, yoga is the union of the individual consciousness with the universal consciousness. Jiva meeting Brahman, the drop remembering the ocean. That can feel abstract. So let us understand it in a way your nervous system can recognize. Have you ever noticed that your body may be in one place but your mind is in another, and your emotion in a third? You sit in a room but you're reliving yesterday's conversation. You're eating but thinking about tomorrow's meeting. You're listening but you're preparing your reply. This fragmentation is a human condition. Yoga is the science of removing fragmentation. It is a deliberate integration of scattered attention. It is the act of bringing your scattered self back into one room. Union is something mystical. Union is the end of our inner division. And when division ends, clarity begins. Now, here is what most people miss. Yoga is not a thing you do for 1 hour. It is a state you return to again and again until returning becomes natural. And this is why yoga has always been described as a path, not as a pose. Now let's travel back. Long before yoga studios, long before organized religions, long before formal scriptures, archaeologists found seals from the Indus Valley civilization, and among them, the famous Pashupati seal, dated around 2500 BCE. On it is a figure seated with what appears to be a meditative posture, composed, symmetrical, surrounded by animals. Scholars debate interpretation. Some see it as a proto-Shiva, Pashupati, Lord of Beings. Others caution against certainty. But what is undeniable is this. The posture is not accidental, it is intentional. It is the posture of someone who has learned to sit inside himself. Even if we avoid claiming this is Shiva, we cannot avoid the deeper truth. The impulse to turn inward in ancient yoga was not invented, yoga was discovered. And then the Vedic stream begins to speak. In the Rig Veda, yoga is not a formal system, but the seals are everywhere. Tapas, disciplined heat, rishi, seer, the language of inner power, the sense the human being can refine himself until truth becomes visible. A Vedic rishi was not a philosopher who debated ideas. A rishi was a witness, someone who watched reality until reality revealed itself. And this is where things become important. Yoga's oldest identity is not workout. Yoga's oldest identity is inner seeing. Then the Upanishads arrived and they shift the axis completely. The Katha Upanishad gives us the chariot metaphor. The body is the chariot. The senses are the horses. The mind are the reins. The intellect is the charioteer. The self is the master seated within. And yoga is the art of not letting the horses run wild. Think about that. It is not religious propaganda. It is philosophical. No, it is psychological insight. It is describing your life. How many people are being tracked by their senses today? How many people are being pulled by cravings, distractions, addictions, constant appetite? Yoga is the skill of holding these reins. Now, the Yoga Upanishads come later and become more practice oriented. Meditation, breath, inner concentration, subtle body ideas. They show that yoga is not one text, it is an evolving river. And then the Bhagavad Gita appears, a battlefield dialogue, a crisis conversation, a war outside reflecting a war inside. Arjuna stands in the middle of his life and says, I cannot do this. He's not just speaking about war, he's speaking about the moment every human faces. The moment where duty, emotion, fear, identity collide. And Krishna's response is not do a posture. Krishna gives yoga, karma yoga, act without attachment to the outcome. Bhakti yoga, love the divine as the center of the heart. Jnana yoga, seeing the truth through discernment and knowledge. And here's the emotional truth hidden in the Gita. Arjuna is breaking down and Krishna does not shame him. Krishna restructures him from the inside. That restructuring is yoga. Because yoga is not about being calm when life is easy. Yoga is about maintaining inner order when life is intense. And this is why it matters today. Because modern life is not a battlefield with arrows. It is a battlefield with thought loops. Now let's pause and answer this carefully. Does yoga belong to a specific Ved? Not in the way people mean it. Okay? Yoga is not a chapter owned for one Ved. Yoga is a civilizational discipline that appears across Vedic, Upanishadic, and Itihas, and later systematic philosophical traditions. You can find seeds in Vedic hymns. You can find introspection and metaphysics in Upanishads. You can find applied yoga in the Gita. You can find precise systemization in Patanjali. You can find embodied methods in the Hatha texts. So yoga is not confined to one shelf. It is a corridor that runs through the whole house of Indian spiritual thought. And now we reach the architect. Around 200 BC to 400 BC, a sage named Patanjali compiles what we call the Yoga Sutras. Not a narrative, not poetry, but aphorisms, concise, precise, almost surgical. And the second sutra defines yoga. Yoga, chitta, vritti, nirodha. Let's pause here, not as a quote, but as a mirror. Yoga is the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind, not destruction, not suppression. Stilling. Chitta is the minefield of memory, impressions, emotions, thoughts. Vritti are the modification waves. Nirodha is calming, restraining, settling. Now here is what most people miss. Patanjali is not telling you to stop thoughts by force. He is telling you if you learn to quiet the turbulence, you will see what you actually are. Because when the lake is agitated, it cannot reflect the moon. And when the mind is agitated, it cannot reflect truth. And what is the truth in yogic language? That you are not your thoughts. You are the witness of your thoughts. This is where Sankhya enters and why yoga is not random. Yoga is not just practice, it is philosophy applied. Sankhya describes reality in two fundamental principles. Purush, pure consciousness, the witness. Prakriti, nature, the seen world, including body, mind, senses, ego. Prakriti moves, Purush watches. Suffering begins when Purush forgets it is Purush and starts believing it is Prakriti. When awareness mistakes thought for identity, when the witness gets hypnotized by the movie. Yoga is the method of breaking the hypnosis, not through belief, through direct seeing. And this is deeply compassionate because yoga does not call you sinful, yoga calls you confused. And confusion can be cleared. Now let's bring this into modern language. When you're stressed, your sympathetic nervous system activates. Heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow, cortisol rises. The body prepares for threat. Modern life keeps the system chronically activated. Emails become predators, deadlines become lions, notifications become danger signals. But this is where things change. Yoga works with the body as a doorway to the mind. Slow breathing stimulates the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve supports the parasympathetic activation. Heart rate stabilizes, digestion improves, and inflammation reduces. The body moves from fight or flight into rest and restore. Pranayam is not mystical, it is a neurological regulation. Asanas is not stretching, it is neuromuscular repatterning. When posture stabilizes, breath stabilizes. When breath stabilizes, the nervous system stabilizes. When your nervous system stabilizes, your mind stabilizes. This is why yoga has always been described as a science. Not because it is clinical, because it is repeatable. Even today, you can test it. The next time you feel anxious, do not change your life immediately. Change your exhalation. lengthen it softly. You'll feel the nervous system begin to listen. Yoga is the art of teaching your body that it is safe, and safety is the soil where awareness grows. Yoga trains attention regulation. When you hold posture with awareness, you learn sustained focus. Yoga reduces emotional reactivity because in a posture, discomfort arises and you don't immediately escape. You learn response over reaction. Yoga strengthens impulse control. You observe urge without obeying it immediately. Yoga stabilizes identity. When you observe thoughts as objects rather than self, you reduce cognitive fusion. You stop becoming every thought that passes. And over time, something changes quietly. You stop needing the world to be perfect in order for you to be okay. That is not a motivational quote. That is a yogic outcome. When fluctuations come, when identification loses, and awareness stands clear, the distinction between observer and observed softens. Moments arise where you're not separate from experience. No internal commentary, no egoic narrative, just presence. That is union. Not mystical fireworks, not visions, not drama, just undivided awareness. And if you want the most honest definition of yoga, it is this: yoga is learning to live without inner conflict. Pause, let that land. How much of human suffering is not because of life, but because of the fight inside your mind? Yoga dissolves that fight. Now let us walk through the 8 limbs of yoga sequentially, but as an unfolding story, not as a list. Yama comes first because yoga begins how you treat life. If your outer relationships are violent, your inner world cannot become peaceful. Ahimsa teaches non-violence, including towards yourself. Satya teaches truthfulness without cruelty. Asteya teaches non-stealing, even of others' energy. Brahmacharya teaches wise conservation of desire. Apigraha teaches non-hoarding, the release of compulsive grasping. Then comes Niyama, because yoga is also how you cultivate yourself. Saucha is cleanliness of body but also of mental diet. Santosh is contentment without laziness. Tapa is discipline, the willingness to be uncomfortable for growth. Swadhyay is self-study, the courage to face your patterns. Ishwar Paridhana is surrender, the softening of egoic control. Only then does asana come, not as performance, but as steadiness. Patanjali does not obsess over shapes. He insists on stability, because instability pulls you outward. Then pranayama, breath discipline, because breath is the bridge between body and mind. Then pratyahara, withdrawing senses, because unless you can turn inward, you will remain a servant of the world's noise. Then dharana, concentration, because a scattered mind cannot taste truth. Then dhyana, meditation, because concentration becomes flow. And lastly, samadhi, absorption, because the seeker dissolves into the scene. Now here is what most people miss. Asana and pranayam are the 3rd and 4th limbs of yoga. Modern culture begins at limb 3 and ends at limb 4. We built an entire industry around the doorway and ignored the temple. And this is why people feel yoga helped my body, but my mind is not the same. Because yoga was never meant to stop at visible limbs. Now let's widen the frame. After Patanjali, yoga evolves into more embodied traditions, including Hatha Yoga, which brings the body, breath, and subtle energies into strong focus. Texts like the Hatha Yoga, Pradipika, and Gheranda Samhita describe methods involving asana, pranayam, mudra, bandha, and purification practices. But even here, the aim is not physical beauty. The aim is to make the body a stable instrument for consciousness. Hatha is not gym. Hatha is alchemy. It treats the body as a vessel that can be refined, not worshipped, not hated, but refined. And this is why yoga is not anti-body. Yoga is not body obsession either. Yoga is intelligent relationship with the body. Now, if you specifically ask me to explain Patanjali's work and how yoga was modernized, let's pause and understand this carefully. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras became a foundational text for Raj Yoga, yoga of mind discipline, meditation, and liberation. But modern global yoga, what most people practice today, came through a historical journey. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, teachers began presenting yoga in ways that could travel. Swami Vivekananda introduced Raj Yoga to the West as a system of mind and spiritual discipline. Later, yogic practices were shaped through teachers like T. Krishnamacharya and his students, who emphasized asana systems that became widely popular. As yoga traveled, it adapted. Some adaptations were helpful, making practices accessible to householders, busy people, modern bodies. But some adaptations came at a cost. The trimming away of ethics, self-study, inner discipline, and spiritual aim, leaving only form. So modern yoga in many places became asana first. The body became the advertisement and the mind became the forgotten purpose. This does not mean modern yoga is wrong. It means it is incomplete. The modern world took one limb and called it the whole tree. And now people are hungry for the tree again. Asana is visible. It is photogenic. It is measurable. It can be displayed. Stillness cannot. Ethics cannot. Samadhi cannot. A culture built on display naturally chooses what can be displayed. But yoga was never meant to be consumed. Yoga was meant to be lived. And the greatest sign that yoga is living inside you is not that you can do a difficult pose. It is that when life shakes you, you can still return to yourself. That return is yoga. If yoga is union and we are fragmented, then yoga is not optional. It is necessary. Not for performance, not for aesthetics, but for sanity, for coherence, for remembering who we are beneath noise. Tonight, we uncovered its roots, its philosophy, its psychology, its physiology, its spiritual aim, its ancient and living continuity. But this is only the foundation. Because now the real question emerges. How does one walk this path? Not in theory, not historically, but personally. How do you practice yoga when your schedule is crowded? How do you practice when your mind is cluttered? How do you practice when you are hurt, angry, grieving, distracted, addicted to stimulation? Because that is where yoga becomes real. In part 2, we move from understanding yoga to practicing it as a living inner journey. And something shifts when understanding becomes embodiment. Pause, breathe, notice the space between thoughts. We will begin from there. To watch the full video, subscribe to our YouTube channel now. Hit the bell icon to never miss an update.